When a corrupt anti-Trump judge humiliates Barron Trump in court, he thinks he's above the law. But when his target fights back, karma hits fast, leaving the entire courtroom in stunned silence. But before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The day started like any other at the District Court of Columbia. Judge Eleanor Winters swept into her chambers, her face already set in a stern frown that made her assistant physically recoil. "Cancel my lunch," she barked, not even looking at the young man who had been working for her for only 3 weeks. "And get me the file on the Trump case, now." "Yes, Your Honor," he stammered, nearly dropping his tablet as he hurried out. Judge Winters' reputation preceded her. Known for her harsh sentences and controversial rulings, lately her behavior had become increasingly erratic, especially in cases involving anyone connected to the former president's family. "Your Honor," her clerk approached cautiously, "Mr. Trump has arrived for the hearing." Winters' expression darkened instantly. "Well, isn't that special?" she sneered. "Make sure he knows this isn't some celebrity event. In my courtroom, his last name means absolutely nothing." The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted noticeably when Barron Trump entered. Now 20 years old and studying law, the tall young man moved with quiet confidence, nodding respectfully to the court staff. Despite his famous name, there was something unassuming about his demeanor, something that seemed to irritate Judge Winters even more. "Let's get something straight," Winters announced, her voice cutting through the murmurs in the courtroom. "I don't care what your last name is. In this courtroom, I am the law. Is that clear, Mr. Trump?" Barron's measured response only seemed to aggravate Winters further. "Perfectly clear, Your Honor. I'm here simply to present the facts." "Facts?" Winters scoffed. "We'll see about that." Her gaze shifted to the defense table. "Now let's get this circus started." The case itself seemed minor on the surface. Barron had been accused of interfering with a conservation project near a university where he had been volunteering. The prosecution claimed he had used his family influence to bypass environmental protocols. "For the record," Winters interrupted the defense attorney's opening statement, "I'm already tired of the political theater in my courtroom." She shot a pointed look at Barron. "This isn't a campaign rally." The defense attorney tried again. "Your Honor, we're simply establishing the context of Mr. Trump's environmental work." "The context?" Winters barked out a laugh. "The context is that your client is accused of using his family name to bulldoze over regulations. Period. I don't need a history lesson about his so-called charitable work." Every time the attorney mentioned Barron's academic achievements or community service, Winters would cut him off with increasing hostility. "Irrelevant. Move on." Her gavel slammed down so often the court reporter had trouble keeping up. When it was time for Barron's testimony, Winters' behavior became even more erratic. "Stand up straight when you take the oath," she snapped, though Barron's posture was impeccable. "And speak clearly. I won't have any political doublespeak in my court." "Your Honor," Barron began calmly, "I can attest that all permits for the campus wetlands project were obtained through proper channels." "Oh, here we go," Winters interrupted, rolling her eyes theatrically. "Another Trump fairy tale about following rules." The gallery stirred uncomfortably. Even the prosecution looked uneasy at the judge's obvious bias, but Winters was just getting started. "Let me be clear," she leaned forward, her face reddening. "I've seen enough wealthy kids try to hide behind their family names. Your presence here doesn't impress me, Mr. Trump. In fact, it makes me question your character even more." Barron remained composed, but something in his calm demeanor seemed to further enrage Winters. The judge's hands trembled slightly as she shuffled through her papers, her eyes darting nervously to specific documents on her desk. "I have here," Barron continued steadily, "documented evidence of the proper environmental review process, including the Madison Creek assessment meetings." "Those records are inadmissible," Winters practically shouted, though no objection had been raised. Her reaction seemed oddly personal, almost panicked. "Your Honor," the defense attorney stood, "on what grounds are you—" "Don't you dare question my rulings." Winters' face was now bright red. "One more word and you'll be joining your client in contempt." The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. This was beyond judicial discretion. It was starting to look like a personal vendetta. "Your Honor," Barron spoke up, his voice remaining respectfully firm, "these documents were properly submitted during discovery." "Oh, were they?" Winters sneered. And I suppose your fancy family connections had nothing to do with that? Let me tell you something about your kind, Mr. Trump. You think you can waltz into my courtroom with your privileged upbringing and— Objection, Your Honor. The defense attorney found his courage. This is completely inappropriate. Silence! Winters roared, slamming her gavel so hard it echoed through the chamber. I will not be lectured about appropriateness in my own court, especially not by some Trump apologist and his— Your Honor, Barron interjected calmly, perhaps we should discuss the specific contents of the April 12th Environmental Committee meeting? The change in Winter's demeanor was instant and striking. The rage in her face gave way to something else. Was it fear? Her hand froze in midair with the gavel. She stared at Barron as if seeing him for the first time. Those meetings are not relevant to these proceedings, she managed, her voice suddenly less certain. But her eyes kept darting to a particular folder on her bench, one that seemed to have appeared that very morning. Not relevant? Barron asked quietly. That's interesting, Your Honor, considering those meetings directly involved the Wetlands Protection Ordinance. Enough! Winters slammed both hands on her bench. One more word about those meetings and I'll have you removed. The gallery watched in stunned silence as the judge's composure continued to crumble. Her hands were visibly shaking now as she shuffled papers on her desk, desperately trying to regain control of the situation. In fact, Winters continued, her voice taking on a manic edge, I'm holding you in contempt right now. You think your family name protects you? You're nothing but a Trump riding on Daddy's coattails. Your Honor, Barron remained unfazed, my family has nothing to do with this. But since you mentioned protection, perhaps we should discuss the GreenFirst Foundation's protection payments? Winter's face went from red to white in an instant. How dare you? I mean, what payments? There were no guards. Remove this man from my courtroom. The court officers hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances. Winter's behavior had crossed a line, and everyone knew it. Actually, Your Honor, Barron reached for his briefcase, I have some very interesting bank records here. Would you like to explain the monthly deposits from offshore accounts that coincidentally align with your rulings against environmental defendants? Shut up, Winters screamed, completely losing her judicial demeanor. You have no right, no authority. I am the law here. Me, not some Trump kid who— Barron calmly held up a document. Your signature on these authorization forms suggests otherwise, Your Honor. The judge's next reaction shocked even her own staff. She lunged forward, pointing a trembling finger at Barron. You planted those. This is a setup, a Trump conspiracy to— She caught herself, but too late. Her outburst had revealed far more than any evidence could. A conspiracy, Barron echoed softly. Interesting choice of words, Your Honor, especially given your private meetings with certain activist groups. I will not be interrogated in my own court. Winters was practically foaming at the mouth now. You think you can come in here with your smug face and your evidence? She spat the last word like it was poison. Evidence, Barron continued calmly, that shows a disturbing pattern, like the Rodriguez case last month, where a small business owner lost everything because you wouldn't allow evidence of his compliance to be presented. Just like today. Winters' laugh was almost hysterical. The Rodriguez case? That environmental vandal deserved what he got. They all deserve it. These people think they can hide behind their money while they— Or perhaps, Barron interjected, pulling out another document, we should discuss the Harrison hearing where you mysteriously sealed all records just hours after meeting with representatives from the GreenFirst Foundation. The judge's face twitched violently. How do you know about— She stopped abruptly, realizing her slip. Know about what, Your Honor? The meeting or the $75,000 that appeared in your offshore account the next day? The gallery erupted in murmurs. Winters slammed her gavel repeatedly, but each strike seemed more desperate than the last. Order! Order! I will have order! Her voice cracked with panic. This is all fabricated, a Trump plot to— Like Mrs. Jenkins' case, Barron pressed on. A grandmother who lost her family farm because you wouldn't let her explain where the wetlands documentation came from. Interesting how the company that sued her donated to your re-election campaign just weeks before. Shut up, Winters screamed, her composure completely shattered. You have no right, no authority. I am the law here. Me. No, Your Honor. Barron's calm voice cut through the chaos. You're not the law. You're supposed to serve it, like when you took your oath of office, the same day you opened that account in the Caymans. Winters stood up, her robes disheveled, pointing wildly at Barron. Guards, arrest this man for contempt. Seize those documents, all of them. Now, what are you waiting for? She screamed at the hesitating officers. I gave you an order. Arrest him. Before they do that, Your Honor, Barron spoke up, his composure intact. Perhaps we should discuss why you're so eager to seize these particular documents. I don't have to explain myself to you. Winters was now pacing behind her bench like a caged animal. I am a federal judge. My decisions are final. My authority is absolute. Absolute authority, Barron replied thoughtfully. Seems to be a recurring theme with you, Your Honor. Just like in the Wilkinson case last week, where you ordered all evidence of your private meeting sealed. Winters froze mid-stride. How did you... Those records were supposed to be... She caught herself again, but the damage was done. Supposed to be what, Your Honor? Destroyed? Like the records from the GreenFirst Foundation meetings? Enough! Winters roared, her face contorted with fury. You self-righteous Trumps think you can come into my courtroom and expose... She stopped abruptly, realizing what she'd almost revealed. Expose what exactly? Barron pressed, his voice steady. The systematic abuse of judicial power? The coordinated targeting of certain defendants? Or perhaps the payments you've been receiving to... I said silence, Winters screamed, completely losing control. She grabbed her gavel and hurled it across the courtroom, narrowly missing her own clerk. You want to talk about abuse of power? I'll show you abuse of power. Officers, I want this man in handcuffs now, and anyone who refuses my order will be joining him in jail. The courtroom had become eerily silent. Even the judge's heavy breathing seemed amplified in the tense atmosphere. The officers still hadn't moved, their faces showing clear conflict between duty and conscience. Last chance, Mr. Trump, Winters snarled, her voice dripping with venom. Hand over those documents and submit to arrest, or I'll make sure you never set foot in another courtroom again. That's an interesting threat, Your Honor, Barron replied, opening another folder. Almost identical to what you told David Mercer before dismissing his environmental compliance case. Right after your meeting with CEO Catherine Wilson. Winters' face went ghostly pale. What? How did you... Wilson, Barron continued calmly, who deposited $250,000 into your Cayman account. The same Wilson who hosted that private fundraiser last month. The one where 5 other judges were present, all of whom mysteriously ruled in her company's favor the following week. You have no right, Winters screamed, spittle flying from her mouth. Those records are privileged. Those conversations were private. You illegally... Private? Like the recordings from your chambers? Barron asked softly. The ones where you explicitly told your clerk to lose evidence that would have exonerated 3 defendants who opposed the GreenFirst development project? The clerk, still at her desk, burst into tears. He made me do it, she sobbed. She said she'd ruin my career if I didn't. Silence! Winters roared, but her authority was crumbling. None of this is admissible. You can't prove... Actually, Barron interrupted, everything was obtained legally. Your own security cameras caught the midnight document shredding. Your own phone recorded the threats. Your own signature authorized the transfers. Winters lunged forward, reaching desperately across her bench toward Barron's evidence folder. Give me those files. I order you to... Order denied. The new voice came from the back of the courtroom. Everyone turned to see a team of FBI agents making their way down the center aisle. This court is now under federal investigation, the lead agent announced, his badge glinting under the courtroom lights. Judge Eleanor Winters, stay where you are. You can't do this, Winters shrieked, backing away from her bench. I have immunity. I have connections. Do you know who I am? Oh, we know exactly who you are, Your Honor, the agent replied, including your recent meetings with the GreenFirst Foundation, your offshore accounts, and your coordinated efforts to target certain defendants. Winters' eyes darted wildly around the courtroom, looking for escape. This is all a setup, a Trump plot to... A plot, Barron interjected quietly. The only plot here was your systematic abuse of power, Your Honor. Every biased ruling, Every backroom deal, every attempt to silence the truth, it all ends today. You planned this. Winters pointed a trembling finger at Barron. You and your family's conspirators set me up. No, Your Honor. Barron shook his head. You set yourself up. We simply gave you enough rope to hang yourself with. Your own words and actions today have confirmed everything we already knew. As FBI agents approached the bench, Winters made one final desperate attempt to maintain control. I am a federal judge. You can't arrest me. I am the law. I am the law. The agents had to physically restrain Winters as she tried to lunge toward her chambers. You don't understand, she screamed. They made me do it. The foundation. They have dirt on everyone. If I talk now... That's interesting, the lead FBI agent said. Tell us more about this foundation, Your Honor. But Winters had finally caught herself, realizing how much she'd revealed in her panic. Her face twisted into a sneer, despite her trembling hands. I want my lawyer, and when this is over, you'll all pay for this humiliation. Speaking of payment, Barron stepped forward, producing another document. Perhaps you'd like to explain these transfer records? 6 judges, all receiving similar payments on the same days you did, all ruling against similar defendants in coordinated cases. The gallery erupted in shocked whispers. This wasn't just about one corrupt judge. It was an entire network. The evidence suggests, Barron continued, his voice carrying across the now silent courtroom, that this was a systematic effort to use the judicial system as a political weapon. But justice isn't meant to be a weapon, Your Honor. It's meant to be a shield, protecting all Americans equally. Winters had stopped struggling against the agents, her face a mask of defeat as the full scope of her exposure became clear. Behind her, court officers were already sealing her chambers for investigation. Her clerk was being questioned by FBI agents, tears streaming down her face as she admitted to being forced to destroy evidence under threats from the judge. Winters' final walk of shame out of her own courtroom was a powerful symbol of justice being served. But as the agents led her away in handcuffs, she turned one last time to face Barron Trump. You think this changes anything? She spat bitterly. There will always be others like me. You can't stop us all. You're right about one thing, Barron replied quietly. There will always be those who abuse power. But there will also always be those who stand up against them. That's what makes our justice system work. Not the corruption you represent, but the courage of those who fight against it. The aftermath was swift and far-reaching. Winters' arrest triggered a wave of investigations across multiple jurisdictions. The network of corrupt judges began to crumble as evidence mounted and witnesses came forward. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when the case against Barron was dismissed. The new judge, reviewing the evidence Winters had tried so desperately to suppress, found no basis for the charges. 3 weeks later, the GreenFirst Foundation's headquarters were raided by the FBI. Documents revealed a sophisticated operation targeting specific individuals and businesses who stood in the way of their lucrative development projects. The foundation had strategically placed millions in judicial campaigns, creating a shadow network of influence that had operated for years undetected. The investigation revealed that Winters was just one of 12 judges across 3 states who had been compromised. Bank records showed identical payment structures, all funneled through a complex web of shell companies leading back to the foundation. As for Barron Trump, he returned to his studies with a new perspective on the legal system he was preparing to enter. The experience had shown him firsthand how fragile justice could be and how vital it was to protect it. The system isn't perfect, he told reporters in his only public statement on the matter, but it's worth fighting for. When we see corruption, we have a duty to expose it, regardless of politics or personal cost. 6 months later, as Winters and 7 other judges faced federal charges, internal documents from the foundation were released to the public. They revealed a shocking campaign to systematically target individuals based on their political affiliations and family connections. Project Influence, as it was codenamed in their internal memos, had specifically identified judicial appointments as the most efficient leverage points for policy control. The scandal rocked the legal community and led to comprehensive judicial reform legislation. The case became a landmark study in law schools across the country. a stark reminder of the vigilance required to maintain the integrity of our justice system. Because at the end of the day, justice isn't decided by those who seek to control it, but by those willing to defend it. And if you believe in standing up for truth and accountability, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more inspiring stories of justice prevailing against corruption. God bless you, and God bless America.